Love his stuff. Throws obviously really hard. His splitter's nasty. The command is the issue, and it probably was his issue, forever. I think he can figure it out, and he is the best pitcher on the Mets. So that says a lot about Kodai Senga, his character, his stuff, and his desire to win. And that is, I couldn't say enough about him. He's one of those guys. So I try to put myself in his shoes. I think of him as, and I don't know him, but I think of him as a very nice guy who wants to do well, throws hard. And I think he puts a lot, like when fans put pressure on him, I think it throws, like if he throws a ball, a couple of balls, walks somebody, it kind of rolls and steamrolls, and it gets worse and worse and worse. And I noticed that his first outing for the Orioles, I saw him struggle a little bit. I'm like, oh no, because he's trying to make a good impression with his new team, and now this is the worst impression, because if you're walking people, they're going to be like, oh no, it's happening again, and it's just mentally. But then he recovered and fixed it. So love his stuff. Throws obviously really hard. His splitter's nasty. The command is the issue, and it probably was his issue, forever. I think he can figure it out. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. And I knew that some team was going to pick him up and fix him. He's got a great catcher. So you have Adley Rutschman, who's fantastic at dealing with pitchers. He is one of those guys that he knows how to read a pitcher. You can just tell it from his body language. And Adley is almost like a psychologist behind the plate. So I think he's going to be big for Fuji to help him and to keep him positive and keep him up and keep him doing well. I think it's a big mental game stuff for everybody, and people don't focus on that enough, how much pressure these guys are under, especially when you're coming over from any other, U.S. pitchers are under a lot of pressure. When you come over from another league and you don't know a lot of players, and you're forced to to go to places you're not used to and eat food you're not used to and all, it's tough to make that adjustment. And then to have to play baseball at a very high level. I don't think fans are as sympathetic as they could be, knowing the pressure that these guys are under. And I know they want to win. Fans want their players to win, but understand that if you ever boo a player, they're trying harder than you could ever imagine to pitch well. Like, nobody's trying to walk somebody. Nobody's not trying their best. So it feeds on, it creates negative emotions in players' heads. I think Fuji's got a huge upside with big stuff. And if you get him with the right pitching coordinators, got the right catcher, on the right team, in a good environment to pitch, I really like his upside. I think he's got a lot. I could see him going there during the off season too and working. I expect him to be a different pitcher when he comes back next year. I think the first year is tougher. It's tough for hitters because they're not used to seeing you, but they know what he's about. He throws a really fast fastball, and he's got a splitter, and you can watch those pitches and figure it out. I think now it's up to Fuji to control both mental game wise and mechanics wise, being consistent with his delivery, and then being in the strike zone. If he's in the strike zone, he's going to be really good. I had been talking him up. I mean, I've watched his games when he was in Japan, and I always liked watching him pitch. I knew about the ghost fork. I knew how hard he threw. I didn't know the adjustments that were needed to be made coming to the U.S. with a different size baseball. I wasn't sure all his pitches would play the same. Wasn't sure about his velo staying up there like it has. I know he had injuries in Japan too, multiple times, and he's been, knock on wood, really healthy. And his ability to adjust. Like, number one, his ghost fork has a 59% whiff rate or something like that. And he's using that to make all his pitches better, because every player, every hitter has in the back of his mind that he's going to strike me out with this ghost fork. So he's been mixing in some fastballs in that same tunnel as the ghost fork to get people to take fastballs for called strikes, because they're like, I'm not going to swing at this. This is going to be a ghost fork. And instead it's a 97 to 99 mile an hour fastball. So he's made some really good adjustments. I love his competitiveness. He loves pitching in front of New York, because New York can be a tough place to pitch, and it takes the right character to pitch there, and he has that character. Like, his game rises to the level of the fan base, and he is an ace. And he's pitching on a team with 2 first round that had, until they traded away Scherzer, 2 first ballot Hall of Famers on that team, and he is the best pitcher on the Mets. So that says a lot about Kodai Senga, his character, his stuff, and his desire to win. And that is, I couldn't say enough about him. He was my pick to win Rookie of the Year this year, preseason too, because I just figured he had that experience in Japan, and then to bring it over here, he was going to hit the ground running with those guys to help him, with Scherzer and Verlander to help him through it. And he's been probably better than I thought. It took him a little bit to get adjusted to the baseball. And once he did, he's been consistently good, and at times great. Like, his stuff has been really, really good. And I love his ability to rise to the occasion. Like, he's good. And I think Mets fans view him as their ace too. Like, talking to Mets fans, they're excited every time Senga pitches. Yeah, he hadn't yet figured out. He was trying to learn a couple of pitches. So he's switching. He's working on a sweeper that hasn't really been his go-to pitch at all. But I know he is working on that, and also trying to figure out how the size of the baseball was going to impact his pitching. And I'd asked him in spring training, did it affect your velocity? And he said no. And I was kind of surprised, because I thought maybe the bigger baseball would be harder to throw, and he wouldn't have quite the speed on his pitches that he did previously, but he does. Like, he's throwing, I mean, I don't know what his average was in Japan, but he's got to be pretty close to his average velo in Japan, right? I don't think everybody knew how hard he throws consistently. That's the thing. Like, everybody heard the ghost fork. I think they were waiting to see what major league hitters would do to adjust to it, and they haven't been able to do anything to adjust to it. And it's because he's so smart and able to swap in other pitches to keep hitters guessing, and not just relying on that ghost fork. But very, very impressed by the job that Senga has done. Yeah, I mean, I can't say enough about it. So he's a really good dude. Like, I like him as a person. I think he's his interpreter Hero is a good guy too. Like, I interviewed him first, and then Kodai. The first thing that jumped out at me is shaking his hand. His hands are weirdly long. So I think that probably has something to do with his ghost fork. It's almost like he's got double jointed hands, and they're a little long, maybe like a Pedro Martinez type fingers. So yeah, that surprised me. And like, shaking his hand, it was unlike shaking other people's hands. It was this longer. So that really jumped out at me. Just, he's a nice guy. Like, he was excited to meet me, and I was excited to meet him. And seems like a really nice guy. And which is tough. So nice guys don't always do well in New York, because New York is a tough place to pitch. They will yell at you and scream at you. And I always worry about guys going there who I like, because it could break you with all the fan expectations, but not Senga. I mean, I guess it's his story, right? He came up through the developmental system in Japan and wasn't highly drafted or anything like that. So maybe he's just used to being an underdog and a fighter, and that's what you see in his pitching. Yeah, I think his stuff is amazingly electric when I watch him pitch. Like, the best prospects since, like, Garrett Cole and Steven Strasburg. So he's got everything, and he may come over and be a Cy Young contender right away from day one.